right, welcome back, everyone. I'm sorry for the few days of hiatus. I've been having a lot of projects on my hand, so that is a good thing. Hopefully that will also benefit you guys in the future. I'm trying to see what I can make of it within the world of Magic. A little bit of commentary, a little bit of player agency, lots of stuff going on. And but hey, now we're back to playing Magic, and I played a few challenges this weekend, and I was lucky to top 8-1. And this tournament had an immense amount of highlights. So yeah, first thing I want to do Monday morning is get together a replay video for you guys' viewing pleasure. Let's get into it. So I'm playing Blue Black Reanimator and Legacy. I've kind of been switching between two Dimir decks, mixing in some mono red for good measure. I like all of those three decks. Yesterday I decided to go with Dimir Reanimator. At the end of last week, Thursday or Friday, I worked on the deck and ended up with a list that I published on my Patreon with a guide for the format. So definitely check that out if that's within your wheelhouse. But without further ado, let's try and dissect this list. So no Wastelands, very important. I don't believe this deck is strong enough to play a tempo type game. I don't believe there's enough utility lands in the format to warrant it, especially after the loss of Grief. That's kind of our quote-unquote Delver that we don't have access to anymore. So no Wastelands, and I'm simply trying to push my plan A on the opponent. That's how you can, when you kind of remove utility lands and you add, stuff to bolster your plan A, that's me prioritizing that. So if you want the deck to be more, let's call it well-rounded or flexible, play your Wastelands. It's all good. I'm playing all the cantrips, Entombs, Thoughtseize, amazing card. I remember before Grief got banned, I don't really want to get into that too much, but I just want to mention that I predicted that Thoughtseize as a replacement for Grief would put this deck at I think I said 85% strength, and that was still enough to be the best deck in the format. Whether that's true or not, up to you to decide. I just remember that was kind of my prediction, and I'm not very good with predictions, so I'm kind of patting myself on the back for that one. Of course, we got Metamorphosis Fanatic in the meantime to also theoretically improve the deck, so who knows where the truth is buried. So I play 3 days. I still play 3 animated decks. The frogs are, untouchable. That card is, I would say, the best card in Legacy. But, I mean, what's the definition, right? I just think that card is awesome. 2 Braces in my 75. I've been playing, pretty steadily, so sometimes I can fit both in the main. Sometimes I need both in the sideboard. Force of Wills and Fatties, not much to say there. Metamorphosis Fanatic is actually a card that I really, really like because, one, it synergizes with our plan A, which is entombing a Fatty, or, plan, let's call it A1 of cycling a Troll and then having Fanatic. But it's also just good in random games of Magic where you just go, oh, draw, go, oh, nice Miracle Fanatic. Or if you have it in your hand, you could do some shenanigans with Frog plus Reanimation. It's good in black matchups where your creatures actually die and they don't get exiled. So it actually plays well into both plan A and B, and that's why the card is good. I replaced basically Murktide Regent with the Fanatics. So in that light, it's just great, right? As long as my blue count is responsible, which it is because of Psychic Frog. I remember the versions with, Doughty Voidwalkers or Bowmasters like half a year ago. They didn't have the blue count to make this swap. Whatever, doesn't matter, it's in the past now. Yeah, as I said, the Fatties are fine. Then double consign for, Eldrazi's mainly. Catch-all here, Brazen, Mirrored Lage, Leyline of the Void, stuff like that. Only a single Force of Negation, which is basically saying combo is not that heavily played, but I do want one card against fast combo, Chalice decks, Trinisphere, etc. Trying to punish Eldrazi and land strategies here. Then 3 Macabres. 3 Macabres is just the best hate against the Mirror, in my opinion. 0 mana, it can't be interacted with. The games are, whether my opponent is going for, trying to reanimate Archon or trying to reanimate a Frog, this card will 0 mana counter a reanimation spell. A couple of Barrogoyfs for when things get grindy, especially awesome against Ancient Tomb decks. Shoot the Sheriff, general removal spell. I'm prioritizing it over push number 4 this time. Killing an opposing Fanatic, killing something like Murktide Regent, other big creatures. If you play a 4th Fatal Push, I don't blame you. As I said, 3rd Fatal Push, 2 in the main deck, 1 in the sideboard. Could be a little bit sus, let's see. And then 2 copies of Dark Betrayal. So when you're registering cards like Dark Betrayal, that means the metagame is incredibly predictable. So this is basically me saying, okay, if I want to win my next Legacy tournament, I need to be ready for the Dimir decks at the top of the standings. So yes, if I was playing in an open field or FNM type environment, I would run the second Shoot the Sheriff and the fourth Push over these Dark Betrayals. But when I play online or playing like semi-high stakes tournaments, I want Dark Betrayal. So that is the state of Legacy, and that is the state of Dimir Reanimator. Let's get to it. All right, guys, quick message here. If you want to have access to my deck guides, my strategy articles, whether you want to pitch me a sweet deck to play on the channel, whether you want to look into coaching or simply just want to say thank you for the content I put out, please check out my Patreon below and become a Baron today. Now, let's get back to the games. All right, time for round 1. This is game 2. I'm up a game in the mirror. My sideboard plan has been bring out the broken stuff, bring out the bad, well, quote-unquote bad counterspells. Here I choose to keep 3 Force of Wills on the draw. I'm actually not too sure about that. I might want just the 3 dazes all the time against the mirror. As I've talked about numerous times, I expect the format, or the games rather, to be quite fair. Nobody wants to rely on this plan. But with that being said, if that's the general consensus, then maybe, you know, people will deviate from that and actually, you know, rely on that. Let's see. I'm on the draw here. My hand is fine. I have some lands, some removal spells, some threats. I mean, can't really complain. That's basically what I sideboarded for. Note the Shoot the Sheriff is probably way worse than Fatal Push here. Let's say my opponent goes Frog, then all of a sudden I'm very soft to daze, but that's what we have to deal with. Let's see. If Magic Online wants to respond here, that would be great. Also worth noting, my hand can allow to sit on basic lands. I like that a lot. No reason to get wastelanded, especially when you have a card like Baragoyf in hand. So unless your hand is looking like I need, you know, double black on turn 2, then I can't make this move, or double blue on turn 2. I was too fast, but I shuffled 3 mana sources there. Random drew a troll, not a very good draw, but still, you know, it's my land number 3. It works with Animate Dead. It's fine, right? So now I'm hoping my opponent does not go for Entomb. That would be quite bad for me. Okay, my opponent cycles Troll. That's totally fine. Okay, so this is a cool play. My opponent goes for the Brainstorm before land drop. That can mean 2 things, in my opinion. It's either my opponent only has 1 land, or my opponent wants to bait out a daze, because that would generally be bad for me to daze turn 1, and they want to bridge into turn 3 Baragoyf, which would then not get dazed, right? So what's the reason my opponent is doing this over doing that? Are we trying to bluff? Are we trying to represent strength when we're weak? Stuff like that. It's very important to pick up on. But with that being said, I don't have the daze, and I would not have dazed if I had it. I think that's the relevant stuff that I need to say. So now I draw Fatal Push, which is a decent draw. I expect the game to be like that. So now I go Animate Dead on my opponent's Troll, and the reason is if my opponent just has Fairy Macabre or Daze, sure, those cards are not going to change. The Daze looks like it's going to be effective against, you know, my overall plays. This game, I'm very mana heavy compared to, you know, what kind of mana I have available. So I'm basically saying you need it now, or it's going to be bad, right? My opponent has the Fairy Macabre, gets rid of the Troll. Very expected. My opponent plays Psychic Frog around Daze here, which is cool. Just a solid play. Now let's see how I play this following turn. It looks like I want to develop the Troll, which is kind of a 0 mana play if you can't make your land drop. Then you spend 1 mana to cycle to get your next land. Let's see what we can draw for the turn. Thoughtseize is the draw, so I definitely want to fire that off. Now I just have to think about the order. And I think what I end up doing is I Thoughtseize first. And then if I see a daze, it's actually kind of a problem. Then I would have to take the daze, so I hope I don't. Let's have a look at this hand once more. So that one is gone. My opponent has a great hand of, let's see, Entomb, Fatal Push, Psychic Frog left after I take the Reanimate. I take the Reanimate because it's like a 1-mana frog, so to speak. I'm scared to see the Entomb, but my opponent does not have a Reanimation, so they might have to, you know, hang on to that card. And in the meantime, I hope that I'm able to find either a Force of Will or a Fairy Macabre. But it's pretty scary that that thing is looming. I cycle for Underground Sea, and I push my opponent's Frog. So now I just expect my opponent to play out the 2-mana Frog. And then I can kind of kill that and slow down the game, and this is going to be a grind fest. These matchups are... I love to play them because I think I excel in the fair games where we're, you know, killing each other's stuff, making choices with Thoughtseize, play around days or not, trying to balance our land spell ratio with Brainstorm, etc. I think I generally do well there. Opponent with just good sequencing here, Frog first, then Ponder into the potential days. Just good fundamentals. My opponent keeps the cards, so now I'm actually quite scared. I draw a Dark Betrayal, which is just a good card here. So now, after having seen my opponent's hand, previous turn, my opponent saw 2 new cards. I just decide to not respect Daze. But if I'm gonna get dazed, I want it to be on my Frog, I believe. So a Dark Betrayal, the opponent's Frog, play my own Frog. My opponent has a Fatal Push. We knew about that. The Frog is gone. And let's see. Here's Reanimate. So this is very, very curious. So my opponent could have gone Entomb, Archon, or Atraxa, then Reanimate. But they simply just... This is the power of Daze, by the way. This is the power of Daze. Even when Daze is not there, Daze is the Phantom Daze or the Shadow Daze. That's what I talk about from time to time. The threat of a card. This is like a card like Stifle will get respect when it's not there. Daze... This is immense respect. My opponent is even targeting my graveyard and not their own graveyard, which is something I wanna mention here. That in a matchup with Brazen Borrower, taking a card out of the opponent's yard is, you know, some kind of gamble. So I will say this: the Metamorphosis Fanatic is a card that can only bring back stuff from your own graveyard. So let's say Frog was my only creature in the graveyard, then I could see the argument, because then you're saying I don't want your top deck Fanatics to be game breaking. But here I don't like it, and obviously it's going to get punished here with the Brazen. So, and then comes a Ponder. So my opponent's really respecting Daze here. I draw another Dark Betrayal. So let's see how I play this. So I Brazen Borrower, I hold up Swamp. So you can argue, yeah, if you hold up Island, you're representing more stuff. But I simply don't want to get, you know, wastelanded, move to the next phase, then develop a black creature. I want to be able to use my mana because I want a Dark Betrayal end of turn if my opponent plays a black creature. And if I don't draw land, I want to be able to cast this Baragoyf. So it's just, yes, I'm giving up that my hand is not, you know, I don't have Brainstorm, but it's better for my mana and threat development. So using your mana, not being afraid of giving over info, that should be low on your priority list. Let me put it that way. A Dark Betrayal end of turn. And I draw Force of Will, which is more or less the ideal draw here. So now I can go Baragoyf with Force of Will backup. My opponent does not have Revolt for push. I don't expect my opponent to play Dark Betrayal. So one of my opponent's cards is going to be Entomb. And now let's see if they keep respecting the Daze. We should have a counter here every time my opponent respects Daze. And then basically I'm trying to... This is so hard in my second language, but I'm trying to say that every time you respect Daze, that's like a pile building up, right? And you have to measure that pile versus casting cards into Daze and getting dazed. So if you keep giving it respect over and over, it's going to add up, and then that downside will overtake the downside of actually getting dazed. I hope that makes sense. My opponent casts Entomb here for Archon, which I'm going to allow. I want my opponent to spend mana. I'm going to force this Reanimate. I hope my opponent doesn't have a second Reanimate or Daze, then I get screwed. The second Reanimate is kind of the card that punishes me, but that would mean the fourth out of the deck, so pretty confident this will work. I will say that my opponent having an Archon in the graveyard, it's, you know, it's not nothing, but also now my Brazen Borrower from exile will definitely So let's just imagine my opponent draws Animate Dead here. I'm still winning this game because then I flash in the Borrower, I sacrifice that one, I untap, and I shoot the Sheriff, unless there's some creature type here. I shoot the Sheriff, and then I keep attacking with Baragoyf. Sure, I lose the Fanatic out of hand, but now I'm actually beating the Archon, which is a pretty good place to be. But last turn I wasn't. End of turn, a little bit of surveilling and developing the Brazen, just good sequencing around days. And here I believe my opponent is throwing in the towel. Yeah, my opponent concedes here. So pretty cool game where I had to play into days a lot, but my opponent didn't. And that's basically the difference between winning and losing here. If my opponent, jams their best card every turn, I feel like I'm losing this game. And I was able to find some sweet spot protecting my mana and then not respecting days, never getting hit by a frog. Yeah, and then win slow and steady. I think this was a pretty good showcase of how to maneuver this mirror. And then, of course, there's the high variance of if my opponent keeps in, a little bit of Entomb, a little bit of Archon, bad things can happen out of nowhere, but that's just how it goes. All right, off to a great start. Let's keep it up. All right, next game on the horizon here. I'm down a game against Eldrazi round 2. This is a good keep. I googled some Eldrazi decks, and let me put it this way. Leyline of the Void was not on my calendar here, so my Brazens are in the sideboard. Let me quickly reveal the sideboard. Not too much stuff going on here. I bring out some situational counters and then trim a little bit on my reanimation package because I expect to get, Fair Macabre or Kozilek's Commanded and play somewhat of a fair game. I guess I cast turn 1 Ponder here, and I see 3 just simply bricks, unless I want to rely on my opponent's graveyard, but shuffle that, draw another Frog. So Psychic Frog is conveniently the best card against hate. Now you see my opponent developing even a Chalice of the Void here, and I draw a 3rd Frog, which is so funny. So worth noting is I'm fetching Underground Seas here, but I'm keeping my Delta because I have Harbingers in my deck and I want access to Swamp later. But for now, the Underground Seas are just fine. I put it with no play here, so this is where I expect if my opponent had Dismember, they would have fired it off. If my opponent had Kozilek's Command, they would have killed this Frog. So here I feel like the coast is clear. That's basically what my opponent's saying here, because nobody wants to get hit by that Frog if you can avoid it. That's my logic anyway, so of course that can be taken advantage of, and I can invest in a Frog and get, Kozilek's Commanded at later stages. But I would say 9 out of 10 players would play like that. Magic at the highest level has a lot to do with reads and tendencies, and then, of course, if something becomes close to, let's say, consensus, then you can break out from that and gain some value because, conventional wisdom says this, but now I'm doing that. So I caught this player off guard, especially when you're playing against, like, Karate Dom. He's a world-class player. He knows that I've played a match or 2 of Magic, so it's definitely interesting. What I end up doing is putting 2 fatties into the Frog, drawing the card into another brick, developing another Frog, and here I'm hanging on to the Delta because at this point, I don't know if I'm going to need that extra Bana source. Let's just say my opponent draws Dismember and tries to kill a Frog. Then I have exactly 4 cards in hand, and I'm definitely ready to go all in here. Let's see if my opponent can follow up with anything. Oh, yeah, this play puzzled me a bit. I've been thinking about it. Mox Diamond Pass. So in my book, what could that be? In my book, that could only be one thing, and that is Once Upon a Time. Or it's my opponent saying my outs is... Which colored card could that be? Like the Myco Spawn is one of my outs, and if I randomly get Thoughtseized on the diamond, those are not outs anymore. So I play this out, but then why not just play the land? Yeah, I didn't make much sense of it. I mean, Consign to Memory is probably the best card I can draw. Worth noting is that the Replicate will get through Chalice, but the original copy will not, and more on that later. Discarding a Reanimate, discard a Reanimate, trying to get in for 6 here, draw, and now I can't remember what I do. I think I just play land pass, because as you remember, the Replicate copies will get through, but the original will not. So if I develop another Frog, I don't have counter magic. Here's uncounterable. Oh, this makes a lot of sense. My opponent needed 2 colors because... No, I don't know. I don't know about the box diamond. So here's Myco spawn, and then I can counter both triggers. I will make sure I fetch a swamp just for good measure because of the Harbinger. I replicated twice, counted the 2 triggers, and that's all she wrote here. So, I mean, Leyline and Chalice, that basically says all I can do is play, you know, Force of Will, Consign, and Frogs out of my deck. Everything else is just bad magic cards. But yeah, Frog will get the job done in the face of hate, and that means I'm forcing a game 3, which is coming up now. All right, game 3 against Eldrazi. This hand is, yeah, this is fine. I have turn 2 Frog, I have some hard removal, have some consigns if the game slows down. That's fine. Worth noting is I have my Thoughtseizes in the sideboard on the draw against the Chalice of the Void deck. Not really ideal. I believe I have my Force of Negation in there, but maybe I also did for game 2. My opponent on a mulligan shows a Devourer, and here's the Chalice, which is incredibly bad news for my hand. I will say that the Shoot the Sheriff and the Frog are about to hopefully do some heavy lifting. My opponent with a second Soul land here, and then follows up with what I didn't want to see, which is Thought-Knot Seer. Thought-Knot Seer resolves. Thought-Knot Seer takes the Frog, which basically tells me my opponent does not have Kozilek's Command. I believe if my opponent has that card, they go and take the Shoot the Sheriff. Here, I'm trying to play a game of basic lands because while, you know, my opponent is also looking to ramp up, they also have Wasteland in the deck, so it's just a good luxury to have. Entomb is a very bad draw. I will say that at this point, a plan is kind of brewing here. So, first up, this Thought-Knot Seer probably has to die, but I'm also gonna hold up Consign because I can play through the Chalice if I replicate it once, so I'm actually gonna take 4 damage here for my trouble. And my opponent passes the turn here. So they make a Wasteland as a land drop, and they pass the turn. Excuse me. So this tells me a bit about their hand. It probably tells me they don't want to Wasteland, which is good, because I might have to, you know, troll for an Underground Sea at some point. But it also tells me that the Devourer, the opponent might have drawn, you know, Leyline, Devourer. Like, it's tough to predict my opponent's hand here because I don't believe it's Kozilek's Command. Could be Dismember, so all of those cards are on my list here. So end of turn, I'm going to Shoot the Sheriff, which is great play. Now I mean, this is reasonable. Baraglyph is a good draw, but at this point I remember I put my opponent on Dismember, so I don't want to play the Baraglyph out just yet. Entomb is a terrible draw. So now my plan is to hold up Consign. There's no reason, really, to cycle the Troll now, in my opinion, because then I can get Wastelanded out of having Consign open. I have to tap a basic land in order to cycle, then I play C, and if I get wasted, my opponent can play stuff. Right now, I'm guarding against end-step Kozilek's Command, which I don't think my opponent has, but they could have drawn in the meantime. So no Kozilek's Command. Now, my opponent bricks on land here, so now we have a weird game. Now, I have to think about what can I do here. The solution I end up on now is to craft a play that is trying to use Consigns as stifles and then resolving Entomb and Reanimate. So now I'm looking to invest Entomb, Consign to force that through, then Reanimate, Consign to force that through. Let's see how that works for me. End of turn. I need to cycle for an Underground Sea. That's totally fine. I draw another Reanimate, which is probably a terrible, terrible draw. Lots of terrible draws here. I could play Baraglyph, but if I do, I get Dismembered. That's my logic right now. Could be bad, but let's see. My plan now is to go hold up Consign if anything bad happens. If nothing bad happens, I will Entomb. With the Chalice trigger on the stack, I'll replicate Consign to memory and stifle that trigger so I can force through Entomb, put a Traxo or Archon in the graveyard. My opponent breaks once more, so pretty weird game going on here. And now the coast is clear for my play. I will Consign here. Original gets countered. One copy gets through. Then I get wasted here, which makes a lot of sense. My opponent is... So what does this tell me? if my opponent wastelands here, they must see the play that my second consign is teaming up with Reanimate, and they don't want that to happen. This is the level 1 reason to wasteland me here, because they're also, look, they're also slowing themselves down. So this makes me very confident in my play. I go for Atraxa. I draw the land, and that's like the ideal draw, so I mean, here we go. I go for the Reanimate, Chalice Trigger on the stack, respond, replicate. But my opponent has the Fairy Macabre. This is very well played by the opponent. The opponent is basically saying, I'm wastelanding to try to look weak to make you go for it. And now I've invested 4 cards into just simply getting Fairy Macabre. Very, very strong play by the opponent. I love it a lot. So now the opponent doesn't have to worry about double hard counter. This is great. And then my opponent draws a land, number 5, so they're kind of back where they started. So this is, I mean, and now I don't have moves. Now I play the Baragorf out, and now I will know if I'm a genius or I'm not when it comes to the Dismember. Let's see what happens here on the end step. If Baragorf sticks, I'm obviously in great shape. If it gets dismembered here, yeah, it does. Now I'm in terrible shape, right? But I draw another Baragorf. I mean, just in time. I don't think my opponent will have the second, but who knows? My opponent has to pass here. I miracle a Fanatic, and I get back the Baragorf. Like, this is just amazing. But this is the power of Metamorphosis Fanatic. If you don't have it in your hand, it's awesome, because either it's in your deck and it doesn't hurt you, or you just draw it, and then all of a sudden you get, like, this is unreal. I get 8 power for 2 mana here. So now I don't see how my opponent comes back into this game. I can even bring back a Frog here. So now I just go from having 1 creature to 4 creatures in no time. And it's just, I mean, my opponent can't do anything. So, yeah, pretty amazing. And I believe, let's see here. Yeah, I don't think the Devourer is going to do anything. The Devourer is going to kill 1 thing. Then I'm going to make the Frog fly and discard a card to it, and that's 6 damage. So my opponent concedes here. Yeah, I just wanted to showcase this game because it shows how flexible Consigned to Memory is. So sure, it didn't work out this time. I mean, I saw Leyline of the Void game 2. I didn't think that deck would also have Fairy Macabres on top of it. There's a little bit of a read going on with the Dismember that ends up coming true, and then the power of just randomly drawing the Fanatic when things are kind of slowing down. Also, the whole dynamic with the Wasteland, where I actually needed the land, but I also didn't mind my opponent wasting me because that would delay their plan. So a lot of small stuff going on here, and obviously you also need to be a little lucky to win those games, but I think with all the choices I had, I did a reasonable job. All right, so that puts me at 2-0. Let's keep going. All right, this is round 4. I skipped round 3. I want to keep that for a separate video. That match was absurd, so definitely look out for that if you want to see some blue-black versus blue-black grindfest. I'm currently 3-0, and I'm facing off against my Swedish friend, Marcus Ewald. He's an incredible control player. He's been playing control players, control decks ever since you guys were in kindergarten. So yeah, definitely looking for a grind fest here as well. And yeah, I'm mulliganing a bad hand here. And I'm for sure keeping this. So now I can put back the Atraxa that I want to entomb out. Right now, what I could do is entomb right away, but I expect my opponent to cast turn 1 Tamiyo, turn 1 Ponder a lot of the time, so I'm actually fine. The Tamiyo is totally reasonable here. So now I go end step entomb. My opponent lets this resolve, which is awesome, because if I get forced here and I have to daze, then I can't, follow up with Animate Dead, so pretty happy about that. Now I know I'm going to have daze backup for my Animate Dead, right? So, I mean, drawing the Thoughtseize is always kind of tricky here. Just imagine this was Grief. It would have been a lot better, but it's not. I decided to go for the Animate Dead. Archon enters the battlefield. I can get into another Copy of Daze here. Free Animate Dead. So how... This game is over, right? No, it's not over. I'm going to promise you this. This is going to be a treat. So Animate Dead, Daze, Flooded Strand, Psychic Frog, and Thoughtseize with plans of discarding the Metamorphosis Fanatic. The Metagame Fanatic, as I call it. The double Daze is going to most likely be strong against Swords to Plowshares, and then I'm going to Thoughtseize my opponent. And I mean, for me, it's so tough to imagine how to lose from this spot. Let's see. Ponder, you got it. I like how my opponent plays here, basically saying, oh, they do want a Daze. I like it a lot. So here, I have to think about my opponent slow rolling the plow a little bit, so that's why I Thoughtseize first, and then see this hand. Ponder, triple Brain Search. So I end up taking the Ponder. This was actually not an easy decision, but I take the Ponder because I know I can Daze the first Brain Search, and my opponent even has to respect the second Daze or get Dazed twice, and I like that situation. I even develop a Frog here. My opponent blocks here. So, this is an important one. So I need to ask myself, how do I actually lose this game? And it has to do with Terminus on top of my opponent's deck now, which I will double Daze and I will succeed at. Then I'll get one more hit in, right? So my opponent has the Terminus, which they needed, otherwise the game was over. I double Daze. Pretty standard stuff. Keep my black mana in play in case I need double black. My opponent develops a tap land, which is also good for them. Putting a Spell Snare into the graveyard. I draw an Entomb, which is, good. It provides me with, Metamorphosis Fanatic plus Archon. So now, oh my god. Now I can have to look at my opponent's hand here, because if there's a fetch land, there's a fetch land. So now, this is so sick. So my opponent has fetch land, which is Mystic Sanctuary, and double Brain Search. I wonder how I play here. Yeah, I think this is just a straight up mistake, because I know I'm getting Terminus. That's kind of the problem. I know I'm getting Terminus here. I'm not getting Terminus. Oh, why did... Oh, it's a Plains! That's why. Okay, so I actually made a good play here. I just messed up in the replay. Okay, so the reason why I'm doing this is I want... If my opponent... Oh, this is like the super high level. So, if my opponent does not have Terminus, I'm winning this game easily, correct? So I have to hedge that my opponent will actually spike Terminus off of the Brain Search. And the way I'm doing that is by only playing the Frog and then having, Entomb, Archon, Reanimate, Metamorphosis, bring back Archon for later, right? My opponent passes, and I mean, here goes nothing, right? My opponent needs to spike one of the 3 remaining Terminuses here. They don't, but there's a plow for the Atraxa, which is, not the end of the world. So now, I put Animate Dead into the Frog to attack for 3. I realize that Animate Dead is never going to do anything. And now I can choose between... Yeah, this is so sick. Like, I can go Archon here, but, I mean, my opponent just put 2 cards back, so, I don't know. I get rid of a Counterbalance, and then I actually make this one, mainly because I have another one to discard if I get Terminus. So it's fine to just, put lethal in play. All right, sorry for the weird cut here. So yeah, obviously, my opponent has to hit this Terminus or the game is over, which is, that's how it goes. So another Terminus. I make sure to discard the Fanatic in response here. That's kind of my plan. Then I go Fanatic plus Archon. Let's see what my opponent can do to follow up here. Brain Search. I mean... I'll happily daze that card, dazing Island back to my hand. So now I'm not sure I have knowledge about my opponent's hand. I go Upkeep, Entomb, by the way, to hedge against drawing the Archon. 1 out of, 41, but still. Here I see Psychic Frog on top of my deck. At this point, it's still the same. If my opponent can Terminus me once more, I will need more threats, so I'm going to hang on to that card. Then I'm going to reanimate the Metamorphosis Fanatic, get back Archon, drain a card from my opponent's hand. Surely the game must be over now, right? So here's Brain Search. Number 1, 2, 3. So all of them are gone now. My opponent has a Flooded Strand. And remember, that Flooded Strand is a Mystic Sanctuary. Putting Terminus on top. Did my opponent also find a Brainstorm? They sure did. So we're getting Terminus here for the third time. Worth noting is Archon goes on the bottom of the deck. Archon does not go to exile. So there's some shenanigans down the line. But yeah, this game is pretty cool, right? Draw Force of Will. And here I actually make what I would say just a straight up mistake. I'm in Brainstorm mode with this land, but what I should be thinking here is if I draw land next turn, which is the worst possible draw, I want to make that into a useful draw. So if I play out land number 4 and I draw land number 5, all of a sudden my Force of Will does something. So let's see if there's a punishment waiting. My opponent has to plow for the frog, so we're still playing, and I obviously draw land number 4 here, so now I'm naked. Turns out I didn't actually get punished, but I did, you know, put myself at unnecessary risk. So I should have had 5 lands in play right now with Force up. And right now, I'm not exactly winning this game. Like, this is now a close game after, you know, Atraxa, Archon, Frog, you name it. At this point, my mindset is that I'm countering more or less anything with this Force of Will. Oh, by the way, yeah, this is game 1, so no really need to show the sideboard here. Even a Ponder, Tamiyo, any card I'm forcing here. My opponent draws up to 2 cards. Passes the turn. This is just an even-Steven game now after... Yeah, this is so absurd. Very well played by my opponent. So let's see. Can we draw something useful? With Force of Will backup, that would be very nice. With me playing out the 5th land, my opponent must also have Force of Will on the calendar. Land, terrible draw, I have to pass the turn. Now I'm keeping it for Brainstorm, I believe. Let's see. Who blinks first in this epic standstill of a game? My opponent, I believe, draws... Is this 4 Theolingus? Yeah, I think this is 4 Theolingus. So with 3 cards, one of them being 4 Theolingus. My opponent respects days here. I like it a lot. 4 Theolingus for 3. Can't let that happen. And my opponent's last 2 cards, force blue cards. So now I am losing this game, and I have to come up with stuff. 4 Theolingus drawing a card. Okay, this is... this is a cool game. So now I see a Brainstorm and a Miracle, so I'm trying to return the favor here to Brainstorm into that Miracle on my opponent's turn, and I actually make a mistake here. I don't play out my fetch land, and this can definitely cost me if I, you know, if the cards I put back are bad, then I'm forced to draw one more of them. My opponent will, I believe, play a little bit around some stuff here, keeping back 1 creature. My opponent has 1 card in hand. After shuffling with Ponder, I'm going to Brainstorm here before it blocks, hit the Fanatic, put back 2 bad cards, Miracle the Fanatic. My opponent will Brain Search in response. I have no creature to bring back. My opponent hits bad cards, I guess. Second main phase Tamiyo is not bad, and then drawing another card from the Monarch, and I have to draw the bad card here. Like, this is where I thought I actually lost the game, because I didn't play out my fetch land, so I could have gone a fresh one there. So now I play out the fetch land. Attacking with Fanatic, I expect to get chump blocked. We're fighting over the Monarchy here. Also worth noting is just a simple Clue getting cracked or Ponder getting cast will flip my opponent's Tamiyo, and then I could be in a world of hurt. I will say that my opponent being at 3 life here is, you know, decent. Tamiyo getting in there, Blue getting sacked, I believe, with the intention to flip the Tamiyo. Can't really remember this one. Let's just see what happens. Blue getting sacked. And now I'm fetching. Don't want to draw another brick. Fetching out the swamp. This is tiny. I leave an underground sea in my deck, so, you know, even a flooded strand as a mana source, it doesn't really matter. My opponent flips the walker end of turn, so no, you know, possibility to use it. And I draw Brainstorm, which must be one of my best cards. Because I can look for stuff like Fatal Push. That will most likely win the game, but my opponent could easily have a plow. Brainstorm in response to my Brainstorm. I will let that resolve. Force Pitch. So my opponent keeps respecting days, which is quite amazing for me. My opponent pitching a Tamiyo or Counterbalance there. I'm going to hardcast. And then my opponent even had one more force. No, they're brainstorming. Okay. So I get to brainstorm here. The Thoughtseized I don't think is very good. And then I can upkeep Entomb to shuffle here to get a freshie. Now I'm forcing the chump. My opponent's dead if they don't block. They're at 1 life here. I mean, lots of stuff will finish this game, and Archon trigger is one of them. So that's why I want to put the Archon in my graveyard that was put into my deck with the Terminus. My opponent's still the Monarch, and now they have Tamiyo going. Once they go minus on Tamiyo, I'll be in trouble. Let's see. My opponent pluses, and here comes Fourth Eolingus, baby. Still playing around days. I like that a lot. This is so sick. Oh no, it's not Fourth Eolingus. Okay. So it's Wrath of the Skies, getting rid of the Metamorphosis fanatics, sure. So I go for the upkeep Entomb. This game is just so dumb. Another Entomb, very bad draw. So now this Brazen is decent, but I don't want to, you know, play it out. I want to make my opponent make a decision. So let's see. What do they return here? My opponent returns Fourth Eolingus, trying to shut me down. Counterbalance. At this point, if I respond with my Brazen, I might resolve it. But then again, them having a 3-drop is not super likely. So I believe I want my opponent to invest in Fourth Eolingus, and hopefully I can snipe them out of this game. Here's Fourth Eolingus, making 3 creatures. What's going to happen with these 3 creatures? 2 attackers. Okay. That's interesting. I'm trying to think about the price of attacking with 3. My opponent plays a Tamiyo, but my opponent now has Caracas Tamiyo as blocker. Oh, this game is so good. So now I play Brazen Borrower. My opponent does not hit a 3. I believe it was a Plains. Wait a minute. Yeah, reveals Plains. Thinking about what to do here on my upkeep, but I don't think it makes any sense to Entomb. I draw Fetch Land. Atrocious draw. So now, all I can do is attack. My opponent will block and bounce with Caracas. So I'm losing this game. I'm definitely losing this game. Brazen getting in there. Block, bounce. Pretty nice situation to set up here. Here's Tamiyo. Here's my opponent plussing. I take 6. My opponent draws a card. I draw Fatal Push. And we do it. Can we kill the Tamiyo and get in for the last point of damage? My opponent has a random card on top. This is the time to do it. My opponent flips a land, and I take down this game. This was so absurd. So yeah, this was game 1. Remember, I resolved Atraxa, Thoughtseized my opponent multiple times, double dazed my opponent. I got Terminus 3 or 4 times, plowed a number of times. My opponent cast 3 or 4 Brain Surges. My opponent cast 2 Fourth Eolingus. How many forces? 1, 2. Only a couple of forces, I guess. I mean, this game was just one of the best games I've had in a while, and I was very, very lucky to take it down. I do end up taking down the match, which puts me at 4-0, and yeah, looking good so far. All right, this is round 5. This is game 3. I'm facing off against Doomsday, and I think in the previous 2 games, I did not see a heavy creature package, but I still decided to sideboard, for that creature package and basically treat this as a blue-black mid-range matchup where I also want my counters for Doomsday, but Thoughtseizes do a lot of heavy lifting in that department. That also means I'm trimming my reanimation package because I saw my opponent was registering 3 copies of Grafdigger's Cage. If I expect this game to be a fair game, I think this is what I would call a marginal keep. If I just get Ritual Doomsday, it's obviously terrible. So, yeah, let's see what happens. Thoughtseize is just an incredible opener here. So here I kind of get a confirmation that my opponent's on a creature plan, which is both, good and bad news. Frog being a decent draw. Here's Dark Ritual, and now my logic is, if I'm dacing this Ritual, I'm only shutting down, blue, so it's only if color requirements are important, so I decide to let it resolve. My opponent goes Sheldred, and at this point I know my opponent has Force, otherwise this is a bad play, so yeah, I Force a Will here. I daze, my opponent Force a Wills, the Sheldred is here. I go for an Undersea Sewers here, which is, questionable, but I think it's okay because I didn't have a 1-mana play, and I'm desperately looking for removal. I draw Reanimate, so now I can choose to Reanimate Troll. So I just tried to do a little bit of math here. If I Reanimate Troll here, I go to 12. My opponent cannot attack. That would be bad. Then I would block. Then past the turn, I go to 10. I attack my opponent to 10. And at this point, I don't think I'm winning that race because throw in any, cantrip on my opponent's side of the table, and that plan is just totally gone. So I actually decide to look for, Brazen, Dark Betrayal, Push, but I do need a fetch line for that. And yeah, this is definitely me on the back foot. Sheldred getting in there. I plan to play Psychic Frog next turn. Because with that Psychic Frog, I can kind of get back into the game with some, discarding stuff, basically, to trade with the Sheldred and then using the Reanimate to pull ahead. Opponent plays a land, 1 card in hand. I draw another Troll, atrocious draw. I play Frog. My opponent fetches here, and this is where I know what's going to happen now. My opponent's going to go for a Surveil land, Surveil, and then they're going to daze back the Surveil land, that's not good news. So my opponent's really trying to push the tempo here of Sheldred. I'm now at 8 life. Then I'm at 6 when I draw. And yeah, it's time. Definitely time. Sheldred doing its thing here. This is kind of cool. Thoughtseize my Dark Betrayal. Force my daze my Frog. While getting in there where the turbo Sheldred. It's pretty cool to see. Here's another. My opponent keeps the card on top, so I'm not too confident here. So now I draw Fatal Push. So how do I trigger the Revolt on Fatal Push? I have to Reanimate, go to 4, pass the turn with the intention to chump block with Frog. Oh, my opponent has their own Frog. This is not good. So now my opponent does not even attack here because I'm at 4. So what do I do? Cycle Troll. Now what? I believe I need to draw, let's see. I need to draw a removal spell or fetch land. Let's see if we can do it. I do draw fetch land, which is kind of funny. So what I do here is I fetch and I kill the Sheldred. And now I have more cards than my opponent, so I'm currently stabilizing in the Frog situation. I have plenty of stuff to draw that gets rid of the Frog, and then I can kind of pull ahead. But my opponent has second Frog. That is definitely going to make things worse. I draw Barrogoyf. So now, let's unpack this. If I play Barrogoyf, my opponent will, make both frogs flyers and get in for the 1 damage. So now I need my opponent to either believe that I have Fatal Push. The problem is I just passed a turn without doing anything. Same with Brazen. So if my opponent invests in that double attack, I'm just losing. So I decided that my out here is to attack with Frog, make my opponent second guess that move, draw into Brainstorm, and then find 2 relevant things to do. Let's see. A little bit of a fake situation here. Actually give my Frog flying here because this is basically something that makes my opponent's spider senses tick just a little like, am I supposed to not invest my graveyard? Will flying be relevant? So I actually like doing this because this is the highest likelihood of my opponent kind of losing track of what's important. So that's my only out here, is my opponent not blocking. My opponent does not block, which is step 1. But that is good games because I only draw land, and if I play my Barago, if my opponent can just make both guys fly and kill me. So not much to do here, but I like how I played. It was, my opponent had a very, very strong situation here with all the disruption and the Sheoldred. I did what I could, tried to bait the attack, trigger Revolt. My opponent was on top of that. But yeah, and then I got owned by a couple of frogs in the end, so pretty cool showcase of the matchup, I will say, getting into like a mid-range slugfest, which I'm definitely better at, but I still have to respect the ritual Doomsday coming out of that deck. So pretty exciting stuff. So I will just say that what ended up happening here is I'm now 4-1. No, that's not true. Yes, that is true. I end up getting crushed the next round by Mono Red, and that means we have a win-in match coming up. All right, winning in time. I'm playing against Grixis Control, which is super cool. Shout out to James. Always playing some cool Grixis decks that he likes to play, and he's surprisingly competitive doing so. Always cool to see. I've decided to sideboard out all of my counterspells and trim a single enemy dead, and simply play the kind of mid-range game, but still have the threat of my combo. I noted that my opponent has a couple of Cling to Dust in their previous list, which is something that I'm going to say it hurt me quite a bit in this game. Opponent goes turn on Thoughtseize. So this is a big play because what my opponent takes here will tell me a story. But the question is if I can translate that story into something we can use. My opponent's taken Animate Dead. What does that tell us? Now it's time to think. That could tell us 2 things. My opponent's either weak to the graveyard, or they want me to entomb, and then later, if I draw, they want me to prioritize reanimation spells on my cantrips, and then get blown out later. It's a weird one that I'm trying to wrap my head around, and I definitely misjudged it in the moment, I will say. So my opponent thought using that card. I draw a Fatal Push, not a very good draw. I'm thinking about entombing, but I think this is where my opponent playing 2 Cling to Dust and having that basic swamp up basically led me down the path of not entombing here. Which, I mean, I don't mind it. It's good. I have other stuff to do here, right? I think I brainstorm end of turn with the logic that at least one of these removal spells can go. So I draw, Attracts, and Reanimate, and the cool thing is about Frog is it kind of lets me, build my own Entomb if I draw Atraxa. So I will try and hedge a little bit with my mana here. I saw my opponent's playing 1 copy of Blood Moon in the sideboard, starting on some basics here, so I'm trying to build basics. Now I'm playing the Frog at it, and this is where I kind of get super surprised. So if your hand is weak to Frog, why not take it the first go around? Because if I Animate Dead it's I at least have to invest 1 more card to get it to be an attacker. So that was a curious one. Especially because the Cling to Dust is still the Phantom. Let's put it that way. It's just like Days in the previous matchup with one of my opponents. The Cling to Dust is really playing a trick on me here, but I haven't seen it, or it's, well, I don't know if it's there. But that's just how Magic works sometimes. If you see ghosts, you hope that they're real, right? So your adjustments actually make sense. So here My opponent is still holding up the, Phantom Cling to Dust, but it could also be a Pyroblast at this point. So I can't remember what I did here. Maybe I'm in... No, I'm not entombing on upkeep. I think I'm just drawing a random card here and basically seeing what's going on. So now Pyroblast and Cling to Dust are definitely on my radar. The logic is, if you Baleful Strix, you want to keep up the Badlands because you might cantrip into Pyroblast, right? Let's say you just had the Cling to Dust and you don't play Pyroblast, right? Then you just hold up the Swamp to not get wasted. So there's a little bit of stuff going on here. Okay, so I go for Cycle Troll, Surveil. I'm trying to slow this down, and I see a Fanatic. Okay, I mean, that's like the perfect card to tell if my opponent has to Cling to Dust or not. No Cling to Dust on the end step here, if I remember correctly. Opponent's on 3 cards. I take the damage here, and then I think do I Fatal Push at end of turn? That's unclear. I actually think I don't, because I know that I'm going to have mana for Fatal Push next turn, so I'm just trying to postpone my decision, because I'm going to Miracle. And then the plan is here to Miracle targeting Frog or Troll, and then if my opponent has to Cling to Dust, hopefully I can get them with Entomb, Reanimate on Archon. So here, Miracle Fanatic. I believe I target Frog with the logic that if I get Clinged, I have a better creature left in the graveyard. But unclear if that logic is true. So here, why don't I go for Archon? I'm trying to make sense of this. I think now, again, I'm kind of overthinking it, saying, okay, if my opponent has a Pyroblast for the Frog, they might not care about the Fanatic because they have a Strix. So they could easily still have Cling to Dust. I give my opponent a lot of credit here that their hand is exactly Pyroblast and Cling to Dust, and that is... I mean, it can definitely work out, but it's also very, very specific. End step Brazen on the Fanatic makes sense. Here, maybe my opponent's using the logic that, from my point of view, I'm playing against Grixis Control, so why would I have removal spells against, Baleful Strix type cards? With a Brainstorm, they most likely found some reactive cards. I think what I'm going to do here is push, and I believe I get blasted. Unclear. I don't get blasted, so now it's just time to attack. Oh, Bowmasters. Yeah, my opponent's tapping down from black here is basically my go sign. Orcish Bowmasters is not going to be incredibly impactful here. I'm going to give my Frog flying. I'm going to get in for 1, draw a card. My opponent's pinging at the first go-around. That means they're also pinging at the second go-around. But now I know the coast is clear, and I will probably build an unbeatable board here, right? Pitching Atraxa after the Frog getting... Oh, yeah, Lightning Bolt, sure. I discard Troll, I discard Fanatic, and I discard Entomb, because I don't need that card anymore. And now I will reanimate the Metamorphosis Fanatic, which will reanimate the Atraxa, which will draw a ton of cards, and that's the GG. So I lock up the top 8 here. Pretty awesome run out here. I was seeing ghosts when it comes to the Cling to Dust. I was able to do, good things, but I could have done great things. And then at the end of the day, slow and steady can sometimes win the race, especially against decks that can't really punish you all that much for playing a bit conservatively. And then when I found my window and my read, after having hedged a lot, I went for gold here and buried my opponent in card advantage. So pretty cool situation here. I end up top 8ing, and I end up getting completely destroyed by the same mono-red player that I lost to in round 6. My opponent played very well, and I made a few missteps, like not exactly like fetching around Blood Moon, not playing well when it comes to my Revolt. I even played out in a lane I shouldn't have played out, and then I got my Frog Furied. I didn't play very well. My opponent did play very well, and I believe my opponent went all the way to the finals after a 7-0 Swiss performance. So, I mean, not much to say. Very happy with a top 8, and Blue-Black Reanimator is for sure a deck that you either want to play or beat if you're playing in a Turtle Weekend or just any Legacy tournament coming up. Yeah, that's going to conclude the video. I hope you guys had a lot of fun. I sure did, both playing the event and going through the replays and the highlights. I guess my favorite game was the Jeskai one where Marcus refused to die. Can you just be a good boy and die? That's some old James Bond quote, I believe it's from GoldenEye. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. I'm happy to be back, and I'll see you next time.